In the smoke-choked waters of the Strait of Hormuz, where the world's most vital oil artery has been locked in a bloody stalemate for weeks, a desperate and history-defying gamble was made. Leaders in Washington and Tel Aviv ordered a second amphibious assault on Iran's heavily fortified Kharg Island. What was supposed to be a decisive show of strength has instead become one of the most humiliating military disasters for the United States and Israel in the 21st century. As dawn broke over the Persian Gulf, waves of American landing craft and Israeli-supported air assault units raced toward the shores of Kharg, the heart of Iran's oil export empire. The American president had promised a lightning victory. He called it the knockout punch, but Iran was waiting. The sky above the island turned black with Iranian drones. Swarms of low-flying Shaheds and Arash suicide drones slammed into American warships and helicopters like angry hornets. CH-53 King Stallions and V-22 Ospreys, the pride of the U.S. Marine Corps, were shredded mid-air before they could even reach the beaches. Explosions lit up the horizon as Iranian speedboats, the legendary wolf packs of the IRGC Navy, darted between American destroyers firing anti-ship missiles at point-blank range. One after another, billion-dollar Aegis-equipped warships were forced into chaotic retreat, their advanced defense systems overwhelmed by sheer numbers and Iranian tactical brilliance. On the island itself, the first wave of U.S. Marines who made it ashore walked straight into a pre-prepared kill zone. Decades of underground tunnels, smart mines, and camouflaged missile batteries turned every meter of Kharg into a death trap. American soldiers equipped with the world's most expensive gear found themselves fighting ghosts. Iranian Revolutionary Guards appeared from hidden bunkers, struck hard, and vanished back into the earth. This was not just a failed landing. This was the moment the myth of American military invincibility cracked wide open, live in real time for the entire world to see. The art of the deal had turned into the art of disaster. The dream of crushing Iran became Israel's worst nightmare. While American and Israeli forces bled on the shores of Kharg, the Islamic Republic of Iran stood taller than ever, bloodied but unbroken, technologically innovative, and ferociously determined. How did the so-called greatest superpower on Earth suffer such a humiliating defeat, not once but twice on a single island? How did Iran turn a small oil island into a graveyard for American ambitions? And what does this catastrophic failure mean for the American presidency, for Israel's survival, and for the future of the entire world order? We are going deep into the battlefield, and the truth will shock you. While the Strait of Hormuz remained locked in a grinding weeks-long stalemate with oil prices skyrocketing and global shipping paralyzed, the American president grew increasingly desperate. His maximum pressure campaign had failed to break Iran. Instead of seeking a diplomatic off-ramp, the White House, together with the Israeli Prime Minister, made a reckless decision: launch a second, larger amphibious assault on Kharg Island. This was not strategy. This was political panic disguised as military boldness. On the morning of the operation, the U.S. and Israeli-backed forces assembled one of the largest amphibious task forces seen in the region in decades. Multiple carrier strike groups, including the USS Gerald R. Ford and USS Dwight D. Eisenhower, moved dangerously close to Iranian waters. Over 8,000 Marines and Special Forces supported by Israeli air assets were ordered to seize the island, the crown jewel of Iran's oil export infrastructure. The American president publicly called it the final blow that will end this quickly. In private, it was a desperate attempt to create a major victory before domestic criticism became unbearable. What happened next was nothing short of catastrophic. As the first wave of landing craft and helicopters approached the shores, the sky erupted. Thousands of Iranian low-altitude drones, Shahed-136 and Arash series, descended like a biblical swarm. American Aegis destroyers fired dozens of expensive SM-2 and SM-6 missiles, but they were quickly overwhelmed. Iranian tactics were simple, yet devastating. Saturate the defenses with cheap mass-produced drones, while simultaneously launching coordinated anti-ship ballistic missiles from the mainland. Helicopters that were supposed to deliver elite Marines were shredded in mid-air. Multiple CH-53K King Stallions and V-22 Ospreys plummeted into the sea in flames. Footage released by the IRGC later showed American pilots desperately attempting evasive maneuvers only to be hunted down by Iranian shoulder-fired missiles and radar-guided anti-aircraft guns hidden in coastal caves. Those Marines who managed to reach the beaches fared no better. Kharg Island had been transformed into a fortress over decades. Every beach, every oil terminal, every hill was pre-sighted for artillery and mortars. Sophisticated minefields, remote-controlled explosive traps, and underground tunnel networks allowed IRGC fighters to strike and disappear. American troops weighed down by high-tech exoskeletons and night vision gear found themselves fighting in a nightmare of close-quarters combat against an enemy that knew every inch of the terrain. Within the first 6 hours, U.S. command lost contact with multiple assault units. GPS jamming was so severe that Marines reported fighting blind, unable to coordinate air support or artillery. Iranian speedboat wolf packs, hundreds of small, heavily armed vessels, darted between the larger American ships, launching swarms of anti-ship missiles at close range. At least 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers were reported heavily damaged, with one forced to limp away trailing smoke. This was not the clean surgical operation the Pentagon had simulated on computers. This was brutal, chaotic attritional warfare, exactly the kind of fight Iran had prepared for and America had desperately tried to avoid. The second attempt to take Kharg Island did not just fail, it exposed the fatal flaws in American military doctrine: over-reliance on expensive technology, underestimation of human will and asymmetric tactics, and a dangerous belief that sheer firepower could overcome geography, preparation, and national resolve. By nightfall, the beaches of Kharg were littered with burning wreckage. The knockout punch the president had promised had instead become a self-inflicted wound, one that would haunt his administration, drain American resources, and dramatically weaken Israel's already precarious position. The second landing on Kharg Island was not merely a military failure. It was the moment the world watched the limits of American power being brutally exposed in real time. What turned a seemingly routine amphibious landing into a slaughter on the shores of Kharg Island was not luck. It was the result of decades of Iranian innovation in asymmetric warfare, a masterclass in turning limited resources into devastating effectiveness. While the United States poured trillions into billion-dollar stealth fighters and aircraft carriers, Iran quietly built a defense doctrine centered on quantity, mobility, ingenuity, and unbreakable will. At the heart of Iran's success during the second assault on Kharg was its swarm warfare doctrine. As American helicopters and landing craft approached, the sky filled with thousands of low-cost, high-impact drones. The Shahed 136 kamikaze drones, often called poor man's cruise missiles, flew in coordinated swarms of hundreds. Each drone costs roughly $20,000 to produce, yet forced American destroyers to expend million-dollar SM-6 interceptors just to survive. IRGC commanders later revealed they launched over 1,200 drones in the first 48 hours alone. The math was brutal and one-sided. Even if the U.S. Navy intercepted 80% of them, the remaining 20% were enough to saturate radars, exhaust missile stocks, and create chaos across the entire task force. But drones were only the opening act. Supporting the aerial swarm were Iran's precision-guided ballistic missiles. The Fateh 110 and its more advanced cousin, the Zulfagar, played a decisive role. These solid-fuel road-mobile missiles can strike targets up to 700 kilometers away with remarkable accuracy. Hidden in mountain tunnels and underground cities across southern Iran, they were launched in salvos that American satellites struggled to track in real time because these launchers operate on a shoot-and-scoop principle: fire quickly, then relocate immediately. U.S. retaliatory strikes hit empty caves while the real launchers were already repositioned kilometers away. During the Kharg operation, Fateh and Zulfagar missiles repeatedly struck American command ships and beachheads with cluster warheads, shredding exposed Marines and disabling communication hubs. Then came the star of Iran's air defense, the Bavar 373. Often compared to Russia's S-300 but with significant indigenous upgrades, the Bavar uses advanced phased array radars and Sayyad-4 interceptors. Iranian engineers claim it can engage stealth targets at ranges exceeding 300 kilometers. During the battle, multiple batteries of Bavar systems protected the airspace over Kharg and the mainland, successfully downing several high-value American aircraft, including advanced electronic warfare planes that were supposed to blind Iranian defenses. What truly shocked Pentagon planners, however, was Iran's mastery of electronic warfare and deception. From the opening minutes of the assault, American forces reported severe GPS jamming across the entire operational area. Precision-guided munitions lost accuracy. Drones drifted off course. Even the invincible F-35s and F-22s operating in support found their sensor fusion degraded. Iran did not just jam signals. They created entire networks of false targets. Decoy launchers made of simple materials emitted realistic radar and heat signatures, tricking American AI targeting systems into wasting expensive munitions on ghosts. Underground fiber optic networks and low-tech mesh communication systems allowed Iranian forces to maintain coordination even when American electronic attack aircraft tried to sever their links. On the naval side, the IRGC Navy's famous Wolfpacks, hundreds of fast attack boats and unmanned surface vessels, executed textbook swarm tactics. These small, agile craft armed with anti-ship missiles like the Noor and Qatar darted between American capital ships. Their speed and numbers made them extremely difficult for Aegis systems to prioritize. Several Arleigh Burke-class destroyers sustained serious damage, forcing the carrier groups to pull back dozens of miles, exactly what Iran wanted. Perhaps most impressive was the island itself. Kharg is not just an oil terminal. It is a fortified stronghold built over 40 years. A vast network of underground tunnels, command bunkers, and pre-positioned supply caches runs beneath the surface. IRGC fighters use these tunnels like modern-day Viet Cong, emerging to strike American positions, then vanishing before air support could respond. Every oil tank, pipeline, and storage facility had been pre-wired as defensive positions, turning Iran's economic infrastructure into a weapon of war. This is the genius of Iranian military technology. It was designed by a nation under constant sanctions, forced to innovate or die. While America buys its weapons at enormous cost, Iran produces thousands of drones and missiles domestically at a fraction of the price. A single American Tomahawk cruise missile costs over $2 million. Iran can launch dozens of Shahed drones for the same price and achieve similar strategic disruption. The Second Battle of Kharg Island proved beyond doubt that Iran has successfully closed the technological gap in key areas, not by copying the West, but by developing a completely different paradigm. Asymmetric high-tech warfare, a paradigm where human ingenuity, deep preparation, and national resolve multiply the effectiveness of every weapon system. The American leadership and the Pentagon bet everything on superior technology and overwhelming firepower. They discovered painfully that Iran had already prepared for exactly that kind of war. The burning wrecks on the beaches of Kharg tell the real story. In the 21st century, the side that masters cheap, smart, mass-produced systems combined with unbreakable spirit can humble even the mightiest military machine on earth. And Iran has mastered it completely. In the hours following the second catastrophic landing on Kharg Island, the illusion of American and Israeli invincibility shattered completely, not just on the battlefield, but in the corridors of power in Washington and Tel Aviv. The American president, the man who once boasted he would end the Iran problem in 72 hours, was reportedly furious. According to sources close to the White House, he slammed his desk so hard that aides heard the impact through closed doors. His first public reaction was classic, a late-night social media post blaming weak generals, fake intelligence, and radical left Democrats for the disaster. He called the operation a tremendous success that was sabotaged, even as videos of burning American helicopters and retreating Marines flooded global social media. But behind the bluster, panic was setting in. The Pentagon confirmed at least 2 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers heavily damaged, multiple helicopters and V-22 Ospreys destroyed, and hundreds of Marines killed or wounded in the first 48 hours. The carrier strike groups were forced to withdraw more than 150 nautical miles from the Iranian coast, a humiliating retreat that effectively handed control of the northern Persian Gulf back to the IRGC. This was not just a tactical withdrawal. It exposed the hard limits of American military power in the 21st century. America's greatest strength, its power projection through aircraft carriers and advanced technology, became its greatest vulnerability. The USS Gerald R. Ford and Eisenhower battle groups, each costing over $13 billion, were reduced to expensive targets. Iranian anti-ship ballistic missiles and drone swarms forced them into a defensive posture they were never designed for. For the first time in modern history, the U.S. Navy had to admit it could not operate freely in waters it once dominated. Meanwhile, in Tel Aviv, the mood was even darker. The Israeli Prime Minister, who had pushed aggressively for the joint operation, found himself politically isolated. Israeli special forces and air assets that supported the second Kharg landing suffered significant losses. More importantly, the operation drained critical Israeli resources at a time when Hezbollah was intensifying attacks on the northern border, and Hamas remnants continued to tie down forces in Gaza. The Prime Minister reportedly made several desperate calls to Washington demanding more direct American intervention. The answer from the White House was painfully revealing: we are stretched thin. For a nation that built its entire security doctrine around the unbreakable alliance with America, this was a terrifying wake-up call. The ironclad guarantee was cracking under pressure. The political fallout in the United States was swift and brutal. Congressional Democrats, along with several prominent Republicans, openly questioned the wisdom of the operation. Stock markets tumbled as oil prices spiked above $160 per barrel. The American public, already war-weary after decades of Middle East conflicts, began turning against the president's gamble. Polls showed his approval rating on foreign policy dropping into the low 30s. The art of the deal had become the art of denial. Instead of cutting losses and seeking de-escalation, he doubled down, announcing new sanctions and threatening even more strikes. But the world saw through the rhetoric. America no longer had the appetite, the resources, or the domestic support for another prolonged Middle East war. The limits of American power were laid bare in three critical areas. First, technological over-reliance. The Pentagon's faith in precision weapons, AI targeting, and network-centric warfare collapsed when confronted with Iran's low-cost asymmetric tactics. Expensive systems designed for short, high-intensity conflicts proved unsustainable against an enemy willing to fight for years. Second, manpower and endurance. The U.S. military is optimized for rapid, decisive operations with minimal casualties. The meat grinder on Kharg, with its tunnels, mines, and relentless harassment, exposed how vulnerable elite forces become in prolonged close-quarters combat against a motivated defender. Third, alliance fragility. Israel, once America's most reliable partner, was left increasingly exposed. While the American president focused on saving face in the Gulf, Israeli cities faced renewed rocket barrages. The shared victory the Israeli Prime Minister promised his people turned into shared humiliation. Perhaps the most damaging consequence was psychological. For decades, the world believed American military power was unlimited. The images from Kharg Island, burning ships, downed helicopters, and exhausted Marines, destroyed that myth in real time. Allies in the Gulf began quietly distancing themselves. Saudi Arabia and the UAE, once eager participants in anti-Iran coalitions, suddenly became much more interested in diplomacy with Tehran. The leaders in Washington and Tel Aviv had bet everything on one decisive blow to restore deterrence. Instead, they achieved the opposite. They demonstrated to the entire world that even the combined might of the United States and Israel could be checked and bloodied by a single determined nation defending its homeland. As American forces licked their wounds far from Kharg shores, and as Israeli leadership scrambled to manage a multi-front crisis with diminishing American support, one uncomfortable truth emerged. Superpower status is not eternal. It can be challenged, it can be humbled, and in the waters and sands of Kharg Island, the limits of American and Israeli power were not just tested. They were definitively exposed. The empire had struck, and the empire had been struck back harder. The desperate second gamble on Kharg did not break Iran. It broke the illusion of unchallenged American dominance. While Washington and Tel Aviv were desperately trying to contain the political and military damage from their humiliating defeat on Kharg Island, a different story was unfolding across Eurasia. The axis of resistance led by Iran was no longer fighting alone. Russia, China, and North Korea moved swiftly, turning America's disaster into their strategic opportunity. The Second Battle of Kharg Island became the catalyst that accelerated the formation of a new global power bloc, one that is rewriting the rules of the 21st century. Moscow did not waste a single minute. Within hours of the first confirmed reports of heavy American losses, Russian warships from the Pacific Fleet appeared in the Indian Ocean and began moving toward the Strait of Hormuz. The presence of advanced Russian frigates and destroyers sent a clear message. Any further escalation by the U.S. would risk direct confrontation with a nuclear power. Russian military intelligence reportedly provided Iran with real-time satellite data and electronic warfare support, helping blind American drones and disrupt GPS signals even more effectively. Russian-made systems, including upgraded electronic jamming equipment and advanced air defense components, were already integrated into Iranian networks long before the second landing. The Russian president, in a carefully worded statement, praised Iran's heroic defense of sovereignty while warning Washington that continued aggression threatens global energy security. Behind closed doors, Russia increased arms shipments through the Caspian Sea corridor and accelerated delivery of Su-35 fighter components and S-400 upgrades. For Russia, Kharg was not just Iran's victory, it was a strategic win that weakens America's grip on global energy routes and strengthens the Russia-Iran-China axis. Beijing played an even deeper game. While remaining publicly neutral, China quietly became Iran's most powerful backer. Chinese oil tankers continued to dock at Iranian ports despite U.S. sanctions, buying discounted Iranian crude at record volumes. This lifeline kept Iran's economy breathing even as American sanctions tried to choke it. Chinese technological support proved decisive. Iranian drone swarms that devastated the American task force incorporated advanced Chinese navigation chips and AI flight control systems. Beijing also supplied high-resolution satellite imagery and dual-use communication equipment that helped Iran maintain command and control under heavy electronic attack. In diplomatic circles, China worked overtime at the United Nations and in back-channel talks with Gulf states. Chinese diplomats warned that America's reckless adventure was destabilizing the entire region. Several Gulf countries traditionally close to Washington began hedging their bets, quietly opening new dialogue channels with Tehran under Chinese mediation. For China, the Kharg operation was a masterclass in winning without fighting. While America bled money, lives, and prestige, China strengthened its Belt and Road Initiative partners and positioned itself as the future guarantor of stability in West Asia. Perhaps the most surprising contributor was North Korea. Long dismissed by Western analysts, Pyongyang emerged as a key tactical partner. North Korean missile engineers with decades of experience building solid-fuel ballistic missiles under extreme pressure had been secretly collaborating with Iranian specialists for years. During the Kharg battle, Iranian Fateh and Zulfiqar missiles demonstrated mobility and accuracy that bore clear signs of North Korean influence. Reports also suggest that North Korean technicians helped refine the guidance systems on Iranian suicide drones, making them harder to intercept. In return, Iran provided North Korea with valuable combat data from real-world engagements against American systems, data worth more than gold in the world of asymmetric warfare. This exchange of battlefield experience has dramatically accelerated the technological capabilities of both nations. The North Korean leader publicly congratulated the Iranian leadership, calling the defense of Kharg a shining example of resistance against imperialist arrogance. The message was clear. Small nations with strong will and smart alliances can defeat superpowers. The combined reaction of Russia, China, and North Korea transformed a regional conflict into a global realignment. What was intended as a quick knockout blow against Iran instead became the spark that solidified the anti-hegemonic bloc. While American carrier groups retreated in disgrace, Russian warships patrolled nearby waters. Chinese economic lifelines kept Iran strong, and North Korean technical expertise sharpened Iran's sword. This is the new reality. America no longer faces isolated adversaries. It faces a coordinated multi-continental network of nations sharing technology, intelligence, resources, and strategic vision. The limits of American power were exposed on the beaches of Kharg. But even more dangerous for Washington, the speed and coordination of the Russia-China-North Korea response showed that the era of unchallenged U.S. dominance is over. A new multipolar world order is not coming. It is already here, and it was born in the smoke and fire above Kharg Island. The American president wanted to break Iran to reassert American supremacy. Instead, he accelerated the very alliance that will challenge that supremacy for decades to come. The wolf packs of the IRGC were not alone on those waters. Behind them stood the silent, powerful shadow of Russia, the economic might of China, and the technical ingenuity of North Korea. Together they taught the world a historic lesson: no empire rules forever. On the blood-soaked shores of Kharg Island, advanced fighter jets, billion-dollar warships, and AI-powered systems met something they could not defeat: the unbreakable will of a people fighting for their homeland. Technology can be jammed, weapons can be destroyed, but the human spirit forged through decades of sanctions, threats, and betrayal cannot be broken by firepower alone. This is the real story behind Iran's stunning victory in the Second Battle of Kharg Island. For the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps and the people of Iran, this was never just another military operation. This was a sacred defense of sovereignty, faith, and national dignity. Every fighter on that island understood that they were not merely protecting oil terminals. They were protecting the soul of the Islamic Republic and the honor of the Persian civilization that has endured for over 2,500 years. Iranian commanders later revealed that before the American assault, thousands of IRGC volunteers wrote farewell letters to their families, fully prepared to become martyrs. Many were heard chanting religious hymns and revolutionary slogans as they moved into position. This is not the behavior of paid soldiers. This is the behavior of men who believe they are fulfilling a divine and historical duty. Compare this to the American and Israeli forces. U.S. Marines were sent into battle with the promise of a quick, clean operation and a ticket home. Many fought bravely, but they were fighting for orders, for careers, and for a distant political agenda. Iranian fighters were defending their soil, their families, their faith, and their future. That fundamental difference decided the outcome on Kharg. This spirit did not appear overnight. It was forged in the fires of the 8-year Iran-Iraq War, where Iran, isolated and under chemical attack, still refused to surrender. It was hardened by 40 years of Western sanctions designed to starve the nation into submission.